Good morning, good evening. Hello from the East Coast of the US to wherever you are in the world. We're so excited to have you here. My name is Dr. Christopher Lewis. I'm the Director of Graduate Programs at the University of Michigan Flint, but I'm also the co-chair of the SAPA Knowledge Community, which is Student Affairs partnering with Academic Affairs. And as a part of the professional development that we have offered our membership over the last few years, we've been trying to do a lot of partnerships and talking and speaking of our knowledge community, talking about partnerships and looking at the intersections of academic and student affairs collaboration and what each of us can do on our own campuses and the work that we do on a basis to be able to engage people and be able to engage our students in new ways. So we are really excited to be able to connect with our global division, to be able to talk about this from a global standpoint. We've got some great guests today to be able to talk about this. I'm going to turn it over to two people that are going to kind of bring us in as we talk. I'm Nea Bader, as well as Carrie Montgomery. Carrie and Amir are going to be running the webinar today, and we're going to also be recording this. You heard that at the beginning, but we'll be sharing this recording out to all of you, as well as others that also asked to be a part of this, but also put it out onto our YouTube page so that so you can share it with your colleagues as well and be able to share the content further. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Amna and Carrie, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Chris. My name is Omnia. I am the current, and this is a volunteer role, of course, the director of the NASPA Global Division. And I'm very excited for this session because the Global Division tries to, for those of you who don't know about the Global Division, this is an advisory board that focuses on supporting NASPA members who are living and working outside of the USA. And we are cooperating for the very first time with the Student Affairs, partnering with Academic Affairs KC. And I'm grateful for Dr. Chris Lewis, who's, by the way, has been awarded last year NASPA Pillar of the Profession. So very excited to be cooperating. And before I hand it over to Carrie, I would like to ask you, all our dear attendees, to write next to your name the city or the country that you are joining us from. This is going to be very nice to see, like, the kind of spectrum of different people we have. So I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Carrie Montgomery. She is the co-chair of the professional development team on the Global Division, and she's going to be moderating this session and introducing our panelists. At the end, we're going to be answering your questions, which this part is going to be handled by Dr. Lewis. Carrie.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you're joining from. I'm looking forward to seeing some comments in the chat of where folks are located, as Omnia requested that you drop in there. So yeah, if you want to tell us who you are and where you are located right now, that would be wonderful. As you've heard, I'm Dr. Carrie Montgomery Orozco. I'm located in South Florida, right on the edge between Miami and Broward counties. And I am the founder and CEO of KMO Global Consulting. I previously worked at Florida International University as a director of campus life, but have a long history working with international higher education, which has been my passion since I started my career. So I'm a past chair of the International Symposium, which we will probably be talking about at some point toward the end of our session here. That'll be coming up at the annual conference. And as was already shared, I'm the co-chair of our Global Division's Professional Development Committee with my colleague, Neve Nestor, who is at the University College Dublin at the veterinary school. So I don't want to spend too much time talking about who I am, I would like to turn this over to our colleagues. We are expecting actually a third panelist, but we have two of our wonderful panelists here with us already. So we're going to turn it over to them to introduce themselves maybe a little more fully than I did. And then we'll hopefully the third will join, but if not, then we'll just jump into some questions and see how we go. So I'll turn it over to you, Angela.
Great. Thank you so much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I hope you are having a good day, evening, or afternoon so far. My name's Angela Kang, and I am in South Korea currently, working at George Mason University's 4th location in South Korea. So we're one of the few American institutions who have a campus in South Korea near the Incheon Airport. And we are here to bridge the gap of US education to South Korea at a affordable in a way that international education is expensive for international students, but also to help foster and develop and grow Korean students to become more global leaders in many areas, but especially in global affairs, conflicts and resolution, and economics, business, and what else? Computer game designing. Those are the majors we currently have here at South Korea. I have been here close to 2 years. Prior to that, I am from the States for about 20 years between West Coast, East Coast, somewhere in the middle. But right before coming to Korea, I was in St. Louis area, and I forgot to say my title. I am here at Mason Korea. So we are part of George Mason University Korea, and short for Mason Korea. I am here as the Associate Dean of University Life, which is another term for student affairs. And I use she, her pronouns. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. We're very excited to have you here, especially given the time where you are. So thank you very much for joining us today. Russell?
Yeah, thanks. Hi, everyone. My name is Russell Martin. I'm very excited to be here today. First, I apologize for my screen orientation. Of course, I'm having computer issues, so I'm on an iPad that hopefully is not too distracting. On the topic of distractions, yesterday was arrival day here, and today is the first day of orientation for spring. So if you hear screaming, I apologize. It's coming from right outside. I asked everybody to leave me alone for a little bit, but we'll see if they will. It's very nice to meet you all. I am from the United States. I use he, him pronouns. I have worked at a few different kinds of institutions in different locations in the US, but I've been at Franklin University, Switzerland, in the southernmost bit of Switzerland. It's in the Italian-speaking region, maybe 1 hour from Milan. So when you come to visit, you'll probably want to fly into Milan. I have been here for about 9 years. It is a very, very small institution. We're about, depending on the semester, around 350 students. We're accredited in both the United States and Switzerland. So some of the things that I will talk about today may refer to a few things related to being in Switzerland, but also as a US modeled institution and accredited institution as well. As I said, we are a very small student body, and we have, I would say, probably about 60% of our students are from North America, and we have students from many European countries, from the Gulf region, from Eastern and Central Europe, and we also, Asia, and we also have some students from Africa and from South America as well. We have a small number of Swiss and Italian students, which is kind of interesting given our location, but many of them find other options in the region that are better suited for them. We are a liberal arts institution, and so I think that's important context too for some of the things that I'll talk about. Our faculty and staff are also pretty diverse. Many are from the United States, but we also have a lot of, most of our colleagues actually are, I would say, Swiss and Italian, but we have faculty and staff from around the world. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Russell. I love hearing about the different institutions and what you have happening there and how they're structured, and especially as American institutions in other countries, whether as a full institution or as a campus. Very interesting dynamic, I think, probably for some of these questions. I think we're going to go ahead and get started, and hopefully our third panelist will join us as we go along. But if it's okay, Angela, I'd like to ask the first question to you. We have some prepared questions here, and then, as we mentioned before, Chris is going to be monitoring the chat. If you have any questions along the way, then we'll do some Q&A at the end. So I'll go through some prepared questions first, and then we'll take some questions from the attendees. So you mentioned that gaming is one of the main, game development is one of the majors that's at your campus. So I'm wondering, as sort of an entry point, how has technology been used to bridge the gap or enhance the collaboration between academic and student affairs on your campus?
So I think one of the benefits, I think, for us is that we are a US education institution. So our accreditation, our everything, so to speak, it's a copy and paste from, so our campus is located in Fairfax, Virginia. So it's almost like a copy and paste. We're a micro version of the 40,000 campus we have out in Fairfax. So in terms of technology for our students, it's not as different as what we have in the States. But I think in a Korea's context, it might be a little different, especially in the areas of disability support services. I think Korea is still catching up to some of the technologies that's available for students with different kinds of learning abilities. And I think because we bring many things from the States to provide to our students as a service. So even having those tools in terms of support for learning is, I think, one of our strong points and one of our highlights when we talk about what are the services what kind of services do we have for our students when it comes to students with different learning abilities and neurodivergence. So we don't, so maybe I should provide that to a lot of as a context, because we bring many, if not all, things from the States. Some things are just the things you probably are expecting from a US institution. But I think for Korean audience, many times it's, oh, that's very different. Oh, that's very American. Like, so technology in our campus is same. You know, we have computer labs with different softwares to help game designs, but other students. But I think one thing that I think I'm proud of is the ability to provide support to students with different learning abilities, so that they're not that we're still seen as an institution or academic program that is available to students, rather than, oh, I have this kind of learning ability, so I cannot maybe study in that field. So.
Great, thank you. I'm actually going to call on Omnea to see if, while we're waiting for the third panelist, Omnea actually has served as an academic advisor at Qatar University. And so I'm wondering if you have any anything that you would add here. on how technology is bridging that gap between student affairs and academic affairs?
Well, I would like first to explain to the audience that the relationship between student affairs and academic affairs is not what you expect. Things are very different from one institution to the other in the Middle East, and maybe I could have a chance to, I think Dr. Thierry is here. So if I'm gonna specifically talk about Qatar University, there are different programs that have facilitated the work and the cooperation between academic affairs and student affairs. There is still a long way to go. In terms of academic advising, there is a level of support with students in terms of how, as advisors, we communicate with faculty, how we disseminate the information to students. Also, there is this cooperation between academic advising and career advising and faculty. So this, these three aspects, also benefiting from technology. After the pandemic and the sudden realization that we could do stuff online and it's not an issue, that facilitated the cooperation, because we have faculty that are not always keen on doing non-course related stuff, which Zoom has facilitated. And as Angela said, I believe the biggest advantage or the biggest support has been in supporting the students with different kinds of disabilities. That has been the best support possible, and I'm very happy about that. So this is like in terms of technology, but I'm gonna end by saying that we sometimes understand how the young generation uses technology, because we see them holding their phones all day long, but that doesn't mean they are using it like we think they are using it. So it's very, very different than using technology for social media, whatever purposes, as opposed to using a calendar and following on email and doing proper research. And that's a longer, bigger story. So thank you.
That's a really, really good point. The phone is a part of their anatomy at this point, but that certainly does not mean that they are looking at the things that we would hope they would be looking at. I want to acknowledge that our third panelist has joined us, so I'm actually going to pause for a moment and ask Dr. Luescher if he would introduce himself, and then we'll get back into some questions. So if you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're situated.
Yes, good morning or good afternoon in my case. My apologies for being late. Another meeting ran completely over and I had to really cut it off. Yeah, I really apologize. I'm joining you from South Africa, from Cape Town. I am probably one of the few people in this meeting who is neither an academic nor in student affairs. In fact, I always have to say I've never in my life worked as a student affairs professional, but I've worked almost all my life as a student affairs researcher. I am currently the strategic lead and research director for higher education at the Human Sciences Research Council in Cape Town. And I will actually rejoin the University of Cape Town in April as the head of postgraduate studies and research and development there. Yeah, I think that's for an introduction now. Kerry, would you like me to say anything else?
Well, I think actually I'm just going to go right into the next question I wanted to ask, and I think you're the right person to ask as a student affairs researcher primarily. I would ask this, and then I'll ask the other panelists if you want to add anything in the context of your specific institutions. But from your research, what role do you think faculty members play in student affairs initiatives in, I'll say, in your cultural context? So if you want to focus it to South Africa, or if there are other things that you've seen, more globally, and how are they engaged in collaborative efforts across student affairs and academic affairs?
Well, Kerry, that is really an excellent question. And I think it depends a lot on context. Of course, in the US, it's now probably about 100 years or even a little bit more than that. In South Africa and the African context, it's much more recent that student affairs has become a more professionalized part of the university. And in many respects, especially with the smaller and the more elite or tiny even universities, in some contexts, academics, faculty members play a lot of the roles that a professional student affairs service would actually perform in larger institutions, in massified institutions, from psychosocial care for students through to all forms of advising, right? And then, I mean, one still sees that more at the postgraduate level, where supervisors, advisors have oftentimes almost a paternal role in addition to actually the academic role that they're playing with students in some supervision models. And I think to some extent we have to come back and see these roles as integrated again, without losing, however, that there are different professionals playing different roles. But if you want to start seeing the student again in a more holistic and less kind of disembodied way, but as a whole person, then you can't move away from the biopsychosocial, cultural, and academic dimensions all as a whole. And I think I see Brett Perosi is here as well. Brett and I have been doing a lot of research over the last few years, and one of the most fascinating aspects of our research has been on the impact of COVID-19 on student affairs and services globally. And with that, of course, also on students themselves. And there, we've actually found precisely that student affairs started to play again a much more integrated role. But as I say, that depends so much on context. I just heard the tail end of what Omnia was saying about the role of technology, of course, and the increasing role of technology in all of this, and also the need to integrate, for example, academic advising with personal advice, with mental health, disability services, and career advising, and so on. And there again, for example, in the South African context, academic advising is an academic function, support function, and is typically not under student affairs, doesn't report to student affairs. And in some cases, even we see a distinction between student health services and student affairs, and with different reporting lines as well. And that precisely then, creates that problem where even at the highest level, in the South African case, that would be deputy vice chancellors who have portfolio responsibilities for different areas that should actually, at least at that level, start to be integrated in their reporting. I'm aware of one institution that tried to put together the student affairs and academic portfolio to report into one vice president or one deputy vice chancellor, as it is in our context, and it didn't work. They had developed such different cultures, professional cultures, and also a lack of respect often from the side of the academics towards the student affairs professionals who didn't find who didn't find a common language, common discourse, and with that couldn't really understand so well what they're doing. But yeah, that's just a few words to start.
That's great. Very interesting. And I'm just add my own experience of a similar situation at my last institution. They actually combined the divisions of academic affairs and student affairs into one whole division of academic and student affairs. And in the few years that I was there under that model, there was that sort of lack of understanding still about what each other did, and there weren't good opportunities, even though it was set up to, I don't want to say force, but to really create that sort of integration, as you said. And I didn't really experience that in my time there. And now there are still vice presidents of student affairs and of academic affairs under that model. So it's sort of, we brought it together and then it's sort of re-siloed within this overarching model. So it's interesting. I'm interested to hear that it did not that it did not work where you saw your example. I don't know, Angela, Russell, do you want to add anything on this about the role of faculty members in student affairs initiatives at your campuses?
So, yes, at George Mason University, under University Life Department, we have, and actually throughout the university, we have this opportunity called Faculty Fellowship and Faculty Fellows. And I know that means something else in different contexts, but for us, what it is it gives units like us, University Life, that has a project and call on faculty to join our project to provide their area expertise. So recently we had a joint one between academic affairs and University Life here at Mason, Korea, where we utilized the faculty fellow position to get the word out to faculty about the work that University Life people are doing, the opportunities we had for both faculty to be engaged with students outside of the classrooms, but things they could help promote to the students, because even though we are in one building, 7 floors, but all of our classrooms are dedicated to the 2nd and 3rd floor. So we're noticing sometimes students don't go up beyond 3rd floor in their day because they're like, I go to class, and then I leave. So we're trying really hard to get our students engaged. So we use this faculty fellow to kind of bridge the gap between student affairs and faculty. So they know more about what's going on, but at times they help us lead different kinds of projects within this role. For example, even though we have Fairfax, we're about 10 years old here in Korea. So there are a lot of things that we haven't done that our home campus does. So for example, they have student initiative call, or they used to have a student initiative call for Student Magazine, where students put together advices to the incoming class about things around campus, things about their majors, or things off campus as their resources. And we thought that would be a wonderful thing to have in our for our students as well. So this faculty fellow took that on as their one of their duties to gather ideas and how we can have different kinds of advices from different students, and how we could create that into an opportunities to give a little bit of scholarship money for students who contribute the most. So I have never had this kind of partnership with faculty member in my previous institutions. So it was nice to have almost like for me, a faculty member on call. So if I had any questions about like, hey, would faculty appreciate this opportunity? Or, hey, what is the best way to approach faculty about X issue or X initiatives? What is the best way to work with them? Like I had this person on call. So I really like this opportunity that we have. And we are expanding this to different areas. And I'm very proud that it's something we can offer to faculty as a course release for their times of service, and that we have these kind of built-in relationships with certain faculty members. Mm-hmm.
That's a really great program. Who sort of facilitates that? I mean, it's a great incentive. The course release is probably very attractive to a lot of faculty members. So is that like provost level? Who sort of brokered this program?
So it is my understanding our current president, Dr. Gregory Washington, when he joined George Mason University, I want to say about 5 years ago, that he brought this program over. So it came from top down to the different unit heads. But at Mason Korea, I work with our associate dean of academic affairs to share the announcement together. So I would go to her and say, hey, I want to ask for faculty to help with X project. Then she'll say, okay, put this in a nice call for proposal kind of form. And then she'll send it out to her faculty and say, hey, University Life is looking for a faculty fellow in this area. If you're interested, please read through and apply. And then her and we work together to select. So we are mindful of different needs in different academic units as well. Like I don't want to take all econ faculty away from their duties, because in turn they have to, because they're giving course releases, they have to find someone else to teach, pick up that load from faculty. Right. So we work together closely to make sure we can evenly spread out. And then we don't try to overload so much on the faculty fellow role so that we're taking them out of classrooms so much. So I work closely with our academic affairs associate dean in that sense.
That's a really, really nice program. I love that idea. Thank you for sharing that. Russell, I'm gonna turn to you and sort of redirect a little bit on a similar idea, but how do students influence the collaboration between academic and student affairs at your institution? How does their feedback get incorporated into your joint efforts and your collaborative efforts?
To be honest, to be honest with you, I think a lot of the students don't perceive a difference, which is kind of refreshing. They don't necessarily see so much of a difference between student life staff and faculty. A lot of times they'll even use the term faculty to mean like employees of the university. And so, I was nodding along with some of the things that people were saying before, in that I have experienced more collaboration here than I have at institutions in the United States. And that's even with the knowledge that for many of the people who are teaching courses, for many of them, what we do is perceived as peripheral, like as Omneo was saying. For some of them, they see us as party planners and things that are, we put things on that are distracting students outside of the classroom, which is really unfortunate. That being said, though, many of them really do seem to understand what it is that we do, and what a few people have mentioned in terms of educating the whole person, and that these are all parts of their development and learning. And so I think that in a really refreshing way, students don't necessarily always see the difference. Students will sometimes contact me about their grades and asking me to intervene with faculty members, which is problematic because that means they don't know what I do. But like for the purposes of our conversation now, I am able to communicate with faculty members in a way that I haven't been in other ways. They're, again, even though some of them don't really, they have a very specific idea about what a university is. Many of them from a variety of different cultures do call me up on the phone and say, Russ, what do you know about this? Or would you recommend that I talk with this student in this way? So I would say that just to answer your question directly, I think that for many of them, they're offering feedback to the university and throwing it out there, and we're partnering to make some of these things happen. One of the things that has been interesting, as I prepared for this session, one of the things that I was going to note was that I've had more success building academic components into what I do, more so than,
Russell,
Russell, you're muted.
yeah, sorry, I just saw that thing pop up.
Okay, sorry.
I think that with I've had more success inviting faculty members to take part in our initiatives than to involve some student development pieces or co-curricular pieces on the academic side. That doesn't mean that, of course, that doesn't happen, but one of the things that I forgot to mention before is one of our signature programs is a certain number of credits that students need to take in courses that have a 7 to 10 day travel component in the middle of it. And one of the things that has been interesting is that our new Dean of Academic Affairs, he's very concerned about the strain that this puts on faculty. And, we've had concerns about the sustainability and liability, frankly, of having a faculty member alone with a group of 20 to 25 students. And so this semester, I had experience in one of the countries that where we had one of these travels, and I was able to work with a faculty member on some of the coordinating pieces, and then I went to with them and was a part of the travel. And she was very intentional about presenting me as a co-leader of the trip and not necessarily just a helper, which I thought was really very interesting. And actually, just yesterday, we were both invited to coordinate the course again next year, which I'm pretty excited about. So we'll be going back in the fall. And so I think that in terms of what students perceive and their feedback, generally they're just throwing it out there in a pot, into the pot, and we're pulling things out and talking about how we can support one another. I'm not sure if that answered the question, but I'm just glad that I didn't get the technology one because we don't have any money. So
This is the extent of your technology.
that's right. This is my iPad.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Do any of the other panelists want to take a chance on this one about students influencing those collaborations? I don't know. Terry, have you found anything about this? Oh, I see Angela unmuted herself. Okay, go ahead, Angela.
So our university, our location university currently has more Korean domestic students. So they definitely do see the difference between the faculty and university life staff. And university life staff in Korean university setting are more administrative. They just do a lot of paperwork. So when we think of ourselves as also educators to develop the whole student, there's a little bit of disconnect in who we are and who they are to our students. But in terms of student feedback, I think one of the strongest places that we pay attention to is opportunities for internships and career readiness and job placement. I mean, all universities are here to support students to have the career of their dream and further their goals and their families go through that. But I think that even I'm experiencing even more emphasis about career readiness and internship opportunities here in Korea. So whenever we hear these asks from students, because we are also small campus, a student of about 1,000 students, we don't have opportunity to go to external partners for many things. So we look at our faculty for coming in to do a workshop, or and also to help us make the connection to outside people many times if they are they're well vested to Korean environment and have been here for a long time and have a lot of network that they can connect us to in their field. So faculty come in, academic affairs come in that sense of helping students be ready for internship, get internships, and be ready to go for that job interview and have the career of their dreams.
That's great. I'm really glad that they're willing to step in for that, because I know that in the States, we do rely a lot on the Career Center to foster those networks with the, alumni and external. Do you have much, this may be a little tangent, but do you have much alumni engagement at your campus? Since you have a lot of local students?
We have a small number of, not small, but still only a few hundred of Mason Korea graduates that are part of GMU family. But there are many people from Korean community who have gone to GMU for their degrees in the past. So it's not as grand as the one back home, but it's still, we still have some, and they are coming in to serve as mentors. And yes, our faculty are, I think maybe because we're small campus too, like, yes, you always have, the group who's always willing to help, not so much, and somewhere in the middle. But I found in the last 2 years that because our campus is small and our classroom sizes are small, when we go to faculty for help, they know it's really coming from a place of helping students and not passing the work to them. So we have been able to get their support in many areas.
Great. I think I'm going to pose this primarily to, well, Angela, you just gave me a nice segue. So I think I'll start with you, but ask Russell to also consider this question, because you made a good point about how the students in South Korea view that distinction between the faculty and the administrative, and what they think the administrative side is doing, right? They think that's all paperwork and punching numbers. But how does the cultural context of your countries influence the relationship between academic and student affairs? And how does it impact student engagement? So you've both talked about how your faculty get involved, more when you put a call out than the other way around, right? They're not looking for you all to support their programs or initiatives, but how do you think that the cultural context of the country has an influence on that? So, Angela, we'll start with you.
So it is very challenging, I would say, for us here in Korea to help our students to see what we do as part of their development, growth, and the whole picture. Like, for example, I recently saw a statement from a student who I know worked really closely with my student involvement office. But when they said thank you, they said thank you to Career Development Center for making me who I am today. And I was like, well, what about the other folks who helped you to get to the Career Development Center place? But I think we sell a very strong American institution identity to our students. So while many students are still not sure about what university life people can do for me, for my goals in academia or my careers, I think we're doing better. We're getting better to show students the whole picture of things you do in a student club, how you lead a student club and manage your activity can also be helpful in a classroom for small group projects and how to be a good presenter in front of a classroom. We're trying to really roadmap that to show that they all align and they all support one another. So we're working really hard to help our students see that, because, you know, when I worked in the States and when we had orientation, I remember parents and students having a lot of questions for my staff about everything. But here it's very little. So when we do family orientation, for example, like academic affairs gets a lot of questions. My career development center gets a lot of questions, but everybody in the middle is like, okay, they exist. But like I said, we're only been here for 10 years. And I think within the last 5 years, I would say, we made a really big jump to where we are. But one thing I would like to say is, because of that cultural context where they look at faculty members, the professors, as the pillar of our university, it is nice to have good relationships, partnerships with faculty to get them to get students to be involved. Because when it comes from the faculty member to say, hey, Angela, I just heard about this workshop, I think you should go, oh, they'll come. But if Angela get that message from, you know, student involvement officer, may not. So sometimes we try to use that to leverage student engagement.
That's really, really good.
As far as this context goes, I think it's interesting because I would say that my Swiss and Italian colleagues kind of represent both extremes. There are some who view what we do as silly because from a Swiss or Italian perspective, the notion of student services isn't exactly, isn't that common. You know, for example, I have a colleague who works with student permits and maintaining students' legal standing within Switzerland. There's another university in town that is mostly Swiss and Italian students. They don't have that. Students are responsible for doing that on their own. And so many of my, actually, you know, even, you know, some colleagues and faculty members from the United States might also view it in the same way. But for many people, they see what we do as handholding, except for the components that resonate with them most directly. So, you know, for example, mental health resources, and, you know, they can see students struggling and students come to them with concerns about their health. Career services, you know, these elements resonate well with many of our faculty from around the world. But other pieces, they see it as handholding and unnecessary. And, you know, we are in a serious financial crisis right now as an institution. And for many of them, they see us as superfluous, unnecessary components of the university. But then I also have colleagues from Switzerland and Italy who represent kind of the opposite end, where they are completely bought in, they are ready to go, they want to involve us in as many things as we can. So it's kind of interesting. You know, the question is about the cultural context. In some ways, it really represents both ends of that spectrum. I think that that being said, there are times when, because of the role of staff in university life, because of that, some of them I find that they respect the hierarchy a bit more than what I might have seen in other places. And so there may be times when, especially with specific individuals, my boss, the dean, she has her EDD. And so there are times when, instead of making contact with certain people myself, I ask her, hey, would you mind contacting this person for me? Because it's going to matter to them that you have the credential that I don't, or are in a position of higher authority and standing. And so I see that resonate with some people in different ways. But again, kind of on the flip side, as a liberal arts institution, many of our full-time, or no, I'm sorry, not full-time faculty, but people who are not adjunct faculty members, many of them buy into the idea of bringing in learning components from other disciplines and other elements of life, if that makes sense. And so I think for some of them, they may be open to that naturally by being drawn to an institution like us to begin with. So some of it isn't even just the cultural context, it's also the context of our particular style of institution, because that's not a common thing in Switzerland. Yeah, and I'll leave it at that.
Really interesting. Yeah. And the bureaucratic piece of it is interesting. I think in the Italian and Swiss context, probably the bureaucracy piece has such a huge role to play, right? Thierry, can you add anything to this from, I'm sure you've seen how the cultural context impacts through your research. So what would you add here?
Yes, definitely. No, this was really fascinating, both what Angela and Russell shared from their respective contexts. I think in our context, one of the things that how student affairs, to put it in, how student affairs is typically conceived is as that division within the university that actually, especially at the undergraduate level, that levels the playing field for all kinds of students. In the chat, somebody was talking about students at risk, for example, and we heard student engagement as one kind of keyword coming in there. But so in terms of the cultural context, I think the more multicultural the context of the universities, and in South Africa, South African universities are extremely diverse. Students from very different class backgrounds, from different ethnic and racial backgrounds, from very different schooling backgrounds and extent of academic preparation and so on, all come into this massified institutions, anywhere in the size between, I think the smallest university is about 6,000 students at the moment, and the largest university is about 60,000, residential university, about 60,000 students. Entering there, and then at the same time seeing that generally I think student affairs tends to be under-resourced in terms of human resources and so on. So what I see is that the real opportunity here is to see students often forming themselves into different student groups and so on, or being formally and approaching student government bodies, whether at department, faculty, school, or university institutional level, and becoming agents of change themselves. I think that is, in the South African context, that's perhaps a bit different, so that students operate through the institution rather than perhaps in the, it sounded to me, I mean, Russell, you can correct me, that it sounded to me very much that like the student in the Swiss context is like a autonomous agent, and the institution is, I go there and I do what I need to do there, and then I have my social life outside of that context. But in the South African context, often then very different, that is a first time somebody's alone, away from home, and still the handing holds and so on is something that happens at the peer level, but oftentimes those peer groups then become overwhelmed, especially if you see with students at risk, if you see students which have certain learning difficulties or are otherwise abled and so on, and then try and pull in residence councils, faculty councils, SRCs, and so on. And so this is what I see is often the student as the opportunity, as the agent, but then operating within the institution and trying to operate through the institution. And the importance then of seeing the need, not only at the level of student engagement with the academic, but also the social, the cultural component, and so on, and where that point of integration comes, I think, is where the students ask for it in a context of limited resources. So not trying to offer a whole suite of services, right? But often being quite responsive. And that can be seen as something negative, but if you have got, if you are in a resource constrained environment, that might be the only way in which you can actually effectively operate, by firefighting, or by, to some extent, from learning from history, anticipating the fires that are going to come, but maybe having to shift resources as things happen. So that's perhaps a little bit of a different perspective from the South African context.
You know, that's so interesting, and the resource scarcity is, I think, resonates probably with everyone on the screen, right? So I appreciate that different approach, kind of flipping the script on it. I think I'm looking at the time. I'm gonna put one more question to all three panelists, but I'd like to start with you, Thierry, and then we'll go to the questions that were in the chat, and I'll turn the moderation over to Chris. So my final question for the panelists is that, based on your experience, what advice would you offer to student affairs professionals in the US to foster better collaboration with academic affairs? Because it sounds like you each have, based on your cultural context, a little bit of a different, I don't know, I wouldn't say approach, but you have different entry points, I guess, for the collaborations, whether that's more student driven or you driven. So what advice would you offer to colleagues based in the US? So Thierry, if you would take that one first.
Thanks. I might not be the best person to to give advice to colleagues in the US.
That's what we're here for. Every little nugget helps.
Every little nugget helps. Look, I think what is really important is to see and to embrace the moment that there is a reaching out from either side. And I think more often it is probably that nowadays that the reaching out comes from the side of the colleagues in student affairs, who see that there are certain things that my sense is, because as student affairs professionals, typically you have a professional education of some sort. I mean, whether it is in psychology or whether it's actually in student affairs, a master's or even a doctoral degree of some sort, that is quite different with colleagues in the academic side of things, who have typically no education in pedagogy or in curriculum development. They're not professionals, they're amateurs, actually. They're sociologists, they're engineers, they are, law experts, but they are amateurs at the job that they are doing, at academic affairs. Often they try to emulate their best lecturer from their undergraduate days 30 years ago in order to try and be a good lecturer, right? And that's the shocking thing. But student affairs people are professionals, right? And so oftentimes the reaching out actually has to come from the side of student affairs to say, look, these are the kinds of, well, maybe that's the wrong word, pathologies that we observe, within the context of this discipline, within the context of this student body, within the context of this group of students. And that is actually how you're supposed to approach that, and without becoming preachy about it or patronizing, but with really offering here professional advice, and with that really also standing the ground on, look, you are a highly respected expert on political science. I am an expert on how you assist students with this or that learning disability, or how do you integrate learning within a residential in residences or something like that. And we need to start talking together, you know, and to approach it in that way without becoming patronizing. It is already the academics tend to be patronizing, like, so we don't want to do that as well. But I think it's really in the South African context where student affairs as a profession is still emerging, right? Where there are very few actually homegrown academic programs, for example, right? Where you can do a master's or a doctorate in student affairs and so on. It's still much more difficult because those things mean so much in the academic side. But as this is going and where you have it in the US, I think in the institutional context of a university, those qualifications, that knowledge, that expertise, sometimes I think it must just be put there. It must just be said, look, you're not talking to somebody who has been boarded in this division because I was useless, you know, no. I'm an expert as much as an engineer, as much as a historian or something like that. And so that, I think that would be one advice to give.
I love that. I think we sell ourselves short on the fact that we are experts in these things. And you're just making me think that centers for teaching and learning to help faculty with better pedagogical skills or models or what have you, they're, in my experience, they've all been based in the academic affairs side of the house, and probably they should be under student affairs so that we can, because we do bring a different expertise to that. So that seems like a sort of natural place for collaboration that I have not seen happening at institutions I've been at. So really, really great point. Angela, you have anything to add there?
I would like to say, go find a ally, or go make an ally, or go befriend somebody. You know, I think many of us in student affairs are introverts, but our duty calls us to be extroverts, including myself. So I try to at least meet one new faculty member every semester, and try to build relationship with them. And like what Thierry have said, like they sometimes see me as the experts on how to talk to students. They're like, student came and said this, what do I do? And I never, no matter how busy I am, I never turn faculty away or academic affairs people away when they're asking me a question or they say, can I come pick your brain? Because that's just my personal preferences, but I like to offer them support when they ask me first. So I make them my people. So when I need them to do something for me, they are like, oh, it's Angela. I should say, yes, I should show up. So that will be that has worked for me. So if that might work for you, I say go make a friend, go make an ally, and always offer to help them, no matter how hectic your day might be or your days might be. And I noticed one thing, especially with faculty, is they have an idea for something, but they don't know how to execute. And I think that's where we become the teacher for them on how to put together an event, how to advertise, how to make, you know, a desk pretty to attract people's attention. They're like, I want to display books, and they literally just have books. And no one's going to look at that. But we could say, oh, we could bring tablecloths. We could say, you know, look here with googly eyes. So offer your expertise to your faculty friends and your academic affairs, because we have a lot to share with them as well.
Yes, they need to leverage the fact that we're party planners. Russell?
Yeah, well, actually, a few things that both of them said, I think are really important points that have that I was also thinking as well. I think that it's funny, just with what Angela just said. Some of the times, yeah, I think sometimes we internalize this chasm. Like this comes from us sometimes because we're not finding the ally. We may not reach out because it's like, oh no, they're not going to want to engage me. But I think sometimes, like, they want to know how to be cool. They want to know how to talk to these people because they are experts in their own field and might not necessarily have the I guess pedagogy or experience working outside of their fields, especially if they're newer faculty members. That's something that I've noticed here, at least. I think in terms of the allyship, I think that's really important. I think sometimes the hey, involve me comes from an emotional place because we believe in what we do, and sometimes what we need to do is be providing information and not just advocate but inform. So I think that whether that's research-based information, one of the things that we send out to our faculty colleagues every semester is a guide that we continuously update, how to help a distressed student. And so I think for some of them, seeing that there's data behind what we do really makes a big difference. Whereas me telling them that I'm important to the institution doesn't really matter as much. I think also I touched on this earlier, I think finding natural ins to meet joint objectives really, really matters. I'm on a campus right now where as I said before, some of the things that we do don't really resonate with local people or people from outside of certain contexts. And so residence life is often seen as, I work with residence life and several other things, but I often get housing related emails from students and faculty members because they see it as one and the same. They don't necessarily see residence life as a thing. It's just a place where people can live, so that way they don't have to pay a lot of money to live off campus. So I don't think that a faculty fellow program will speak to people in quite the same way that these resources for travel classes, for mental health support, for we have some partnerships with career services. I think that's the natural in, which I think is really important because for some things I have a difficult time making the case for them. And then I think once we invite partnerships, I think that then we can open the door to other things. For our first year students, they all take part in a first year seminar that's really wonderful, well designed. There are a lot of fantastic objectives that are behind the design of the courses. And we started long ago, having the first meeting of the first year seminar courses in orientation. It's one of the days that, in addition to meeting with their advisors and setting their courses, they also meet with their first year seminar class during orientation. I realize that for some campuses, having one single orientation right before the semester starts is impossible. But for us, since we're an international institution and we're really tiny, we bring all the students to campus immediately before the semester or before the fall semester, and they have that first class during orientation. So that for many of our faculty members, that adds an element of academic and legitimacy that they didn't really have before. So then once that door is open, involving them in other pieces has become much more natural. So many of the faculty members will take part in an aperitivo for family members, and they'll join us for some of the dinners because now they have this connection and they can see some of what we do and why it's valuable. So I think, my final little bit of advice is just, open the door, and then hopefully they'll see some other opportunities, and it won't be us trying to make the case for this as much.
Right. Thank you all. Great advice. I hear a lot of sort of meeting the faculty where they are, and in order to find those connection points and then kind of bringing them into the fold. We have to show them what we do, not just pizza parties and teddy bears. Yes. All right, I will turn it back over to Chris.
Thanks, Carrie, and thank you to all of our panelists for all of the amazing insights. We had two main questions that were raised throughout the panel today. The first was from Holly Logan, and she is asking, she said, I'd love to hear the panelists' view on how academic and student affairs can partner to deepen students' sense of belonging to their institutions and campuses, and potentially what successes you've seen. And I'll open it up to any of our panelists.
I think that really encouraging presence, again, I'm on a very, very small campus. And so unless you, happen to live off campus and only come for a course or two, things like that, generally you'll see people at various points. And so I think that people seeing student affairs staff at academic events, I think is really, really important, because students then, I think, see that we are engaged in the community and that we want for them to be engaged with. So I think that they see some of those connections in ways that, like, a little more naturally. I think that's part of why sometimes they'll refer to me as a faculty member, because they saw me at this speaker or at this lecture or this roundtable discussion. And so I think being present really makes a big difference. And then again, it opens the door for our colleagues in academic affairs to attend other things that are going on campus. I think also we have a new building. The Office of Student Life is in a room that has, is in a new building that has a large lounge space that everyone wants to use at all times. And so students kind of see us as a part of this area where all of these academic presentations and lectures and things like that are having. So I think if not proximity, then forced proximity can really help.
Thanks, Russell. Any other thoughts?
I think for us, it's a struggle on both sides of the house to help students feel a sense of belonging to our institution. But I think in our context, having a strong connection to their faculty members means a little bit more at this current time than having close relationships with student affairs folks. So I think somebody wrote on the chat about sharing information with faculty about what's happening from student affairs. I think that's what I rely on to do, share information with faculty and really asking them to be our voices or voices for student affairs to help them see that it's not just inside the classroom, outside of the classroom can still make them feel like they're part of the campus. So that's where I would end it. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. The other question that was raised was by Maiza Shadid, and she asked, can the panelists share ideas or examples of student affairs and academic affairs coordinated efforts to support at-risk students, given the overlapping nature of our work?
Sure, I can jump in there. I think it wasn't I think last year or maybe the spring semester of the previous year, we inaugurated a behavioral intervention team that involves student affairs staff, academic affairs staff, and then a few faculty members as well. And so I think that it's been helpful for everyone to see, and actually we even have a few, someone from admissions and our bursar also takes part in some of these meetings, because I think some of the things that students are encountering, a faculty member may not see in the classroom. I may not see in the various points that I am interacting with students in. But the bursar knows that someone has a family member who lost a job or is really struggling and may need to drop out, or is, you know, so it's been really helpful for all of us to be a part of that team. We meet, as of right now, we meet maybe once a month, if not more often. We have a few shared documents to share information, just because physically we're a bit spread out. And also we have a new, as of right now, we have a new role in academic affairs. A position was just created called the Associate Dean of Student Success. And so he's going to be working with some of the things that our Dean of Academic Affairs has noticed among students. You know, I think that the previous dean wasn't seeing as, I mean, of course she was seeing a lot of students in crisis, but I think that as students are noticeably, or, you know, they're more likely to express that they're at risk than they had been in the past, this role will hopefully be kind of front and center in terms of supporting students and bridging the gap between what academic affairs and student affairs are doing. So this is a brand new role. It's still not quite sure how things will work out, but he may be chairing the behavioral intervention team starting this semester. Either way, he'll definitely be involved pretty directly. So I think that team has been really instrumental in helping all aspects of the institution kind of recognize the role that we all have to play in supporting students who are at risk.
In our institution, at our campus institution, we don't have such a formalized thing as the BIT team or the care team. We have a loose version of a care team where our assistant manager of student care, who gets all these reports or referrals, do a lot of one-on-one outreach to various offices or relevant partners to share information and seek information, and then in an unorganized way talk about how they want to work together to support the student. Maybe a little bit of cultural context that comes to play is, especially with our Korean domestic students, they don't like to have personal situations shared. We think of it as, the more we know, we could think of other better resources to help you, but they really shy away from sharing so much about their personal issues, what's happening with them or what's happening at home. We often get calls from parents or family members. They refuse to tell us the student name. They refuse to tell us a lot of details about the student, but want information. So we are mindful of that as well, and want to respect that cultural context here about students not wanting to so outwardly share information or ask people for help. So we don't have anything formal. I think that's why, but informally we have an open channel of communication with all the academic advisors and folks in student accounts or our mental health counselors, and they're constantly chatting on Teams and talking about on the phone, talking to one another about a student they just met or a student they heard of, and what might be good to be prepared if they come to their office, or how they could respectfully reach out to them.
Thank you both. Really appreciate you sharing that. I just put a question in the chat for anyone else, if there's any other questions. And so far, it doesn't look like anyone else has any specific ones. If someone does have a last minute question that you'd like to ask, you can click the raise your hand button and we can unmute you so that you can ask that. So I'll give it a second just to see if there is any questions. Not seeing any hands going up really quickly. So I just want to say thank you. Oh, Amnea, raise your hand. Go ahead, Amnea.
I want to encourage people to ask questions. So I'm going to give an example until someone thinks about another question to our panelists. So what Angela just shared resonates with me a lot, the culture of the student population that you have. And there is no need, absolutely no need to force things. So in the Middle East, it would be the same thing, the same kind of culture where students don't want to share about their personal situations, parents as well don't want to do that. And the only way or the only reason they would do that is to get an extension on a homework or an exception for this and that. And still they would not be happy at all to be, for me as an academic advisor, to share this with another office. So this is very, very important. Now for an example about the cooperation, I'm happy that I was able to find an ally, to find an ambassador, and this is something that all of you have mentioned. So at my old institution, the VP of a certain college and the VP of student affairs listened to an idea I had, and they bought it. If they didn't buy it, it wouldn't have happened. So we ended up, after months of work, of having the first year seminar that all incoming students take, to have a compulsory homework that is worth, 5% or something of the grade, to be done with the academic advising. So it's they come to me, I have to have a conversation, I give them information, and they set up an academic plan and so on. How things actually work on the ground, it's a little bit different, but it was because of buying in, it was partnership, we have this, and I believe it's still going on. So that's an example of the cooperation between the faculty. It was very difficult to convince them to give a homework and a percentage of the grade and so on. The second example of cooperation was between certain classes that have a high DFW rate. Those faculty were kind of told to cooperate with the tutoring center and to give bonus grades for students who attend these classes. So it was kind of a forced cooperation, but it is happening. So this answers to the at-risk question. But I'm fully aware that these two examples are within the tutoring, academic advising, and maybe career advising, which these three areas are sometimes under academic affairs, not student affairs. Definitely in the Middle East, we have all these American satellite campuses that try to duplicate what's happening in the US, but that is very, very, the minority. The vast majority of institutions, teaching is and studying and stuff, that's where you go. Anything else outside of that is not important. It could be, swept under the carpet at any point in time. My last example is a unique situation with the World Cup. So the World Cup in 2022, soccer for those in the US, football for the rest of the world, this was a moment where student affairs and academic affairs joined forces and came up with 2-year-long cooperation. So many things have happened at Qatar University and through Qatar University in terms of internships, community work, bringing in people on campus to do this and that, to educate students, workshops on volunteering. Special courses were set up 2 years before the World Cup so that students would have a learning experience. Internships, and these courses are no longer there. So that was a very, very special situation because it was a mega event. And because of the Qatar University being the university, the national university. So there is a lot that was happening, and that was very, very special type of cooperation. I've talked, I've given my examples. Any questions?
Actually, one for Gail Lynch Barbados said that it would seem that the impetus to ensure effective collaboration is that of the student affairs professional. How can we ensure that the administration sees this as an imperative and supports our efforts to effectively foster these type of collaborations for student success?
Chris, if I might come in here, something that has been briefly mentioned, but I don't think it has been emphasized enough, is data. And I think that is also a response to this question by Dale. You know, if you have data that you know that can be shared, where one can get a common understanding and common understanding also of the need for intervention, and with that the need for collaboration. You know, we sometimes make the case for what student affairs do with data, but I think it is not only that, it can also be used as a way of making clear where intervention is needed, where points of collaboration you know, will create synergies, and bundling the expertises that I've mentioned earlier, the academic expertise and the student expertise can be most effective. Yeah.
Thank you. Any final thoughts from any of our panelists that you'd like to share today? Otherwise, I just want to say thank you. Thank you to all of our panelists, to Thierry for moderating today, Amnea for helping to pull this all together as well. We've been putting some different links in the chat today about ways in which you can stay involved with both the SAPA knowledge community, the student affairs partnering with academic affairs knowledge community, as well as the global efforts that we're doing within the network as well. Amnea, do you want to talk at all about the what's happening at the conference for your area?
So at the NASPA annual conference, first of all, before the NASPA annual conference, there is the International Symposium celebrating 30 years. So it's typically a pre-conference, but we call it the International Symposium. And if you are here, it means you're interested in global, international aspects of student affairs and academic affairs. So I strongly encourage you to attend, join us. A lot of us here on the screen are going to attend. And we're going to be having, Brett was here, he's still here. Okay, so we have, we're going to, Brett and a couple of colleagues are going to have a session about our inaugural publication. The NASPA Global Division is going to have a publication, and Brett is going to be, talking about that. And the last thing I want to say, because I know of the time, is that please get in touch with us if you would like to be in a future panel, whether it is with this particular KC, Student Affairs Partnering with Academic Affairs, or with the Global Division. We'd love to hear from you. We learn from each other and we support each other. Thank you to all the panelists. Big thank you to Carrie, as always, wonderful work. And thank you, Chris, of course, for starting this cooperation. And hopefully every year we'll have something, or every semester maybe, have some sort of cooperation. Thank you very much.
And thank you all for being here today. As I said, we will share this recording out with you for attending today. We wish you the best in the start of your term, and we look forward to seeing you at the upcoming NASPA conference or on other opportunities to get together such as this in the future. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day.